We are recording, sharing. So we're just going to continue right where we left off on building the shark app. I haven't added anything since we last talked. I did add one thing that we might or might not get to. I added the Sinatra flash gem, which is going to give us the ability to access the flash hash in Sinatra. The flash hash is useful for error messages. If we don't dive into it today, we'll probably dive into it tomorrow. The big gimmick is it is basically exactly like session, except it only persists for one request. So think about it. If there's ever a situation where you want, like, someone fills out a form incorrectly, so you want to redirect them back to that form and you want to contain all those error messages, that's a really good use for the flash hash to be like, hey, these are all the things you did wrong. Go back and fill out that form. And then, like, if you did that in session, it would persist forever and you'd have to manually clear it. But by using the flash hash, just after one request, it clears itself out. So I'll show you kind of how that works either today or very likely tomorrow. But it's a helpful alternative way to send errors over. We haven't done any validations yet, which is a problem for our database. It's something I want to get to after we've built out the rest of this app. So to get started, we currently have the ability to sign up or sign in. So if I do Batman 123, I'm officially logged in. I think this is the correct password. Cool. It now has like log out right here, which is unusual. Oh, right, because I did something silly. I was testing something out beforehand. We do not need to redirect or log in. We need to render welcome. There we go. Cool. So you'll see now it says welcome Batman. There's a couple of other things we can do, right? We can go ahead and create a show page and an index page, which I'll do really quickly. Get /users. Do end. And this right here is going to be the user's index in RESTful actions. So this is new, create. So for this, we can go ahead and say @users equals user.all erb some sort of users/index.html. Now, if we go over to our users view, we can create this bad boy right here. Go ahead, iterate through every user. And if at this point you're still uncomfortable with how to do this, definitely get practice iterating through things and spitting out things and spitting out different HTML elements on the page. So in this case, I'm creating a little list, going ahead and saying, this is very much a coder friendly H1. This isn't normally how you design a website. Like, usually you don't want to talk about your database when you're rendering stuff out to the users, but I want to be very explicit about what we're doing here. So right now, I'm going to create a list item for each. We can start by just going ahead and saying user.name or username. And then if we go over here to /users, we'll say, here's a list of all the shark fans in our database. I'm going to go one step further and make use of our show page here. So we can also create a little link to /users/ we get that user ID, which once again, we're passing each user into this block right here and sending it in as like a little variable called user. So it's saying for each user in the database, create an LI, pass them in as the variable user, and then create this little link right here that shows their username, but links to their show page. So we can click this. We haven't built out a page yet. But we can get to /users/ in this case, I want to make this a dynamic route, right? That depending on which ID is passed in, renders a different user page. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then just to demonstrate, make sure everyone knows exactly what we're doing really quickly. I'm going to put a binding.pry in here. Me putting the word ID here and then going to the link 1 here will mean that in my params, I get an ID key value set equal to 1. It's a very common pattern for using routing to get a show page for a specific user. You don't have to use an ID. Eventually, Rails will give you some tools for slugifying it so that you can like use their actual username, or even like a version of their username that doesn't have any underscores and is all lowercase. That will be an alternate way to get stuff. But user.find params ID, done. ERB users /show.html.erb. Oh, we don't use the .erb. Cool. Nope, wrong. Here we are. Show. We can now really quickly show more data about the users. Right now, we don't have that much data about the user. We have the user's username. I'm just going to put in more data will go here, because we can actually use this to get some nested information about the user, which we'll get to when we finally create our sharks model. But for now, we can in our layouts go ahead and add if logged in see all users. And there we go. Now we can always go to all users to find a list of every user in the database. And then eventually we can use that to display information about each individual user. Now, I think we've done enough on users for a bit. So I'm going to really quickly, that was stupid to kill the server to do this, but I'm going to do a little index, user index, add user index and show. And you were right there. The present tense is the way to go here. Let's go ahead, restart our server. Then in a different tab, I'm going to get ready to generate some new stuff. So here, we decided we wanted to have a sharks with friggin' laser beams attached to their friggin' head. A user has many of those. So we can go ahead and start with that. I'm going to type the word Cornel, see what tips it gives us. And it gives us the ability to create a new model. Cornel model shark. See what that generates for us. Cool. It'll create a shark model and it'll create a little. So the shark model is going to look just normal. It's also going to create an empty, or it's going to have a create table sharks right here, which is going to be pretty much what we want. So, Omar, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here. What column should our sharks have?
They should have names. So t yep. Name dot name is string. Oh, sorry, t string is a name.
Yep.
T string equals with the key of color.
Cool.
And I guess t string with the key of species.
Let's move away from strings. I think I kind of want to add some additional things.
Their age, integer.
T the integer age. Awesome. Cool. So now we have a bunch of information on a shark. We can go ahead, Rails or rake, DB, migrate. we're getting these rake commands from Sinatra active record rake. And I clearly did something wrong. All right. Once again, Cornel is not going to automatically give you the active record version. So just to be clear, I'm using active record version 5.2. You need to tell your Cornel, your migration, that it's going to be also using 5.2. Here we are. And now if we test this out, we can rake console. And we can call shark.new. And it will start filling this out. There's one thing we actually missed here. We want our shark to also have a relationship, right? Our sharks belong to a user. So for that, we can always use our handy rake tasks to go ahead and say rake-t or rake-tasks will give us a create migration that we can use to do something like rake db create migration, add sharks to, or add user ID to sharks. I think that's the appropriate way to name it. We'll see if I'm wrong. There we go. So here we can change, I believe it's add column. You know what? Let's actually just pull this up so that we active record.
Shark, comma,
Yeah, it's going to be sharks, right?
sharks, yeah.
User ID. And then integer is what we're doing right now. Eventually we'll use something like a belongs to for active record, but add column. If you're ever curious about it, there's the documentation for it. And if you want active records, actual documentation, we'll just start with the example. Add part number to products. Here's the products table. Here's the part number. It's a string. So now we can rake db migrate. And the reason we want to use it, oh, I think I might have actually still named this wrong. Yep, let's go ahead and rename this. Oops. They want, that's just getting messy. They want these to all be lower case with underscores. Great. Try this one more time. Cool. So now we can also go ahead and just write belongs to shark or to user. Now, if we rake console, we do shark.new. We can create, what's the name of a good shark? Fine, we'll just go with Jaws. Color, gray. Age. Jaws is a relatively young shark, I think.
Flashing out. He's like 15 or 16.
Yeah. Eventually we'll get to like Shark Attack 3 Megalodon, where they've existed for millions of years. And now for user ID, right? We have to put this in manually right now. But we'll go ahead and do user.first.id. Cool. Now, if I do shark.last or shark.all.last first. All right, we didn't save. I did shark.new. Whoops, let's do shark.create. Now if I do shark.last, let's expand this a little bit. So we save this to the database. And you'll also see that shark.last has this user ID, right? Because I have this belongs to method, and only because I have this belongs to method, I can also call .user. And it will give me that sharks user. If I go user.first though, I will get that same user. If I call sharks, we haven't yet defined the sharks method. In order to make that happen, we just go ahead over to here and say has many sharks. And this will automatically go to the sharks table, look for something with a user ID, and basically write this method out for us. Def sharks shark dot where user ID self dot ID.
So like the belongs to always has that foreign key, right?
Yes. So if we want to create a belongs to, that belongs to should be the one keeping track of the relationship. So the belongs to has this user ID. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you decide like, hey, I want to call it author ID on the shark database or evil genius ID or whatever. That is something you can also do. It's going to require a little bit more customization of this belongs to method. You can always do like, or this has many method. You could always be like, there's like a way to define the class name, to define the source, things like that. There's materials for this. I'm glad to share them eventually. But know that this is also customizable. That becomes really important when you're dealing with self-referential relationships. Like if a user has many followers and a user has many followees, right? Then that's two different relationships that you're looking at the same table, but looking for different columns that both relate to a user. So just know that this is customizable. If you ever run into a situation like that, I'm glad to provide you with resources. But for now, as long as it's literally called user ID in the database, it knows how to do it by itself. And like this, whoops. Pardon. Like this user model is going to go to the sharks table. And because we haven't specified anything else, it's going to look for a user ID because that's the name of the class. So now we have our, if we reload, which I don't think we can do, let's try that again, rake console. We can do shark or user dot first dot sharks. And now we get an array of the sharks. There's actually an active record associations collective proxy, not an array. Basically what this does, it does a lot of optimization for you under the hood. It's only in Pry that it loads this up as an array. Usually it just keeps it as a SQL query to run eventually until you actually need to render something. So that's just a weird magic thing that active record does under the hood. It allows us to chain a lot of active record methods, and then it'll like eventually combine them all into a SQL query. It's unusual. It feels weird to beginner students, but if I want to do like user.first.sharks.limit1, it's actually not going to pull all the sharks and then just give you one. It's going to run the SQL query with that limit 1 added to it. And it will also allow you to do this eventually, like when we get later into Rails, if we want to start talking about Rails optimization, how to become a really smart backend developer. You can always like do join tables in here and things like that. And like therefore limit your active record like queries. We will get to that at the end of Rails as an optional lecture where I talk about efficient Rails queries.
Gotcha. I mean, there's like one thing I came across when I was doing my project. There's not any way to do like SQL query and like Ruby code on the same line, right?
There is.
Is that what the here doc?
Yeah, you basically just can chain it till you get to a point where you get to Ruby methods. Like, for example, here, user.first.sharks.select shark.age greater than 12. This right here is going to first make a query for all of the sharks in your database. Then it's going to see a Ruby method, and it's going to stop thinking of it in terms of an active record collection process. It's going to convert it into array, which will then load it into Ruby's memory, which is going to be a little inefficient and a little slow. And then once it's an array in Ruby's memory, it's going to run the select. And that's how it actually works under the hood. So the goal when you're a backend developer is to do as much as you can in one big SQL query before you get to the point where you're loading things into Ruby code, because that's when things get inefficient. The other issue is something called an N+1 issue. That's way more easy to describe when we have a couple of things that Sinatra or that Rails will give us in terms of just debugging and showing error messages. But for example, let's say I decide to make it so that eventually my user index would have right here number of sharks, right? Where like we would have a list of each user's number of sharks, right? The easiest way to do it would be something like, if we went to our views, like dash user dot sharks dot count, right? Now the issue here, right, is we're actually iterating through each of these using a Ruby method. We're using each. So we're loading them up as an array. And then for each one, we're doing a separate SQL query, right? So this is called an N+1 issue because the +1 is we load up all the users, right? And then for each of those, for each user, for n users, we make one SQL query to ask how many sharks that individual user has. If we remember our SQL, we know that this is actually easy to do in one method, right? We do a group by user ID, like sharks group by user ID, and then we left join that to the users class, and you can do that in one SQL query. The issue is that Rails makes it, and Active Record makes it so much easier to write this. It's like not much easier. I will show you at the end of Rails how to like do that SQL query, but the reputation that Rails has for being slow comes from the fact that it's really easy to write this, and a lot of beginner Rails developers do. So there was a huge digression on efficiency. I will talk to you at the end of Rails about, there's actually a gem that goes ahead. It's called the bullet gem, and it will make error messages that pop up for you that go ahead and say, hey, you're using an N+1 query right now. I would recommend writing this and doing a join on this. It's great. There's like tools for like learning how to do that more efficiently. But do keep in mind that if you want to become a backend developer, this is something that I will eventually start encouraging you to think about. If you want to become a front-end developer, leave it to the nerds. Cool. And for those of you watching at home, if you didn't follow that, that's totally fine. We'll eventually get back to it. And it's also just an advanced concept that you're not going to be tested on ever. But it's important to think about like what you're actually doing under the hood. Cool. So we now have the ability to save a shark. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this up. Boop, boop. Let's just add all of them. Oops. Cool. Add shark model. Boop. Great. We can now create a shark controller. I'm going to go ahead and do that manually. I know that we can generate with Sinatra, but I don't like how it just gives us half written code. Sorry, we can generate that with Cornel. Inherits from application record. And remember, we're inheriting from application record over here. or sorry, application controller. Sorry, over here. An application controller is just another Sinatra controller, right? That inherits from Sinatra base. But it's where we define all of our general rules, including our helpers. Here, we can go ahead and create def. New. We can start with, do we want to start with a new, an index, or a show? What do we think?
An index.
Cool. At sharks equals shark.all. Oh, right. That is bad. Get to slash sharks do. Sorry, in Rails you do def index. So that's a little spoiler for you. Cool. We can now do ERB sharks slash index.html. And here we have to go ahead and create a new folder because this is the first time we're saving some sharks. New file. HTML. And now we can go ahead and go back to iterating through these. Whoops. And I'm forgetting my shortcuts. Fine, until I somehow I remember that.
It won't be a .erb or just the index.
Oh, you are totally right. And that probably is why my shortcuts aren't working. .erb. Cool. There we are. So here I use the ice cream cones, not the squid, right? Because we are telling it first things first, just set up an iteration. And we don't have to render the results of an iteration onto the browser, right? This doesn't need to end up in our HTML. But what goes inside of it, right? Kind of does, right? At shark, or shark rather, .name. Shark.name. We'll give this a little li. Do we get why this, like, this needs an equal sign and this doesn't? We
Equal
want
sign
this to,
is
yeah, go
evaluating
ahead.
and showing. Equal sign is evaluating and showing.
Yeah.
Versus the other one's not.
Yeah, this actually gets put into the HTML. This part doesn't. This just does the iteration and then doesn't get put into the HTML at the end. We can now go to sharks. Oops. Did I do something wrong? Save. Get to slash sharks. Oh, right. Last thing we need to do in our config.ru,
The control, yeah, the controller.
use sharks controller. So now we get JAWS right here. We might as well say something like, start closing some of these. H1. Look, sharks. There we go. We've got JAWS right here. Why are we not saying bullets? That's unusual. We'll think about that eventually. But for now, we got look sharks. We can also go ahead and create a link to a shark show page. That we haven't built out yet, but we can build out real quick. Oops, link to the sharks.id. And give it a little slash. Cool. You can highlight it. It looks like in the bottom left-hand corner, very tiny. You can see that it goes sharks.1, shark/1. There we go. It doesn't show up yet, but we can make it. Get to /sharks/ID 2 at shark equals shark.find params.
So it's just purely like user experience to do like slugs and things like that, right? Just
Yeah.
faster to IDs, yeah.
Yeah. IDs are the most simple way, and you'll see in a lot of like a lot of places don't have readable URLs. It is cool when you can do it, right? And it's also great for sharing, right? If, for example, Facebook will have a default ID, right, which is going to be a generate ID, but will also allow you to set a slug, which is great. Because you can go ahead and like my former roommate is like facebook.com/most viewed page. And like then you can just go like, hey, if you want to like friend me on Facebook, I'm facebook.com/most viewed page. And so like that's it, like that's time when slugifying is really helpful. If you're not really going to share it, it's not that helpful to slugify something. Though it does help if you're like a news organization, you want people to be able to kind of sense what the article is going to be about, even if you're being shared on a site without a preview. So you'll see a lot of news organizations that'll like try to include the entire header in their URL. But just minor things you can do to make user experience a little bit better. So here we can go ahead, show.html.drb, h1 at shark.name. You can give it a little p tag color. Cool. And what do I want to do if I want to say who owns it? Let's say p owner /p.
Shark user.
A shark.user.
Should be .id or
If we do .id, yeah, that would be a little unusual, but it would work. We've got owner 1. If we use shark.user, we get owner. And then this weird hash that says, hey, this is a Ruby object, right? We want to actually like see something useful. It might be helpful to be like username, right? But we can also make this even more useful too. One thing that I would recommend doing, if you have this resource, why not link to it? Boop, boop, boop. This is all customization. It's up to you. I think this is a helpful little way to make your app more navigable. So we can go from here to cheese. Yep. And then cool. We now have this like linked up setup, right? Let's go ahead now and create this new .html.erb because I think that's something that we should continue to develop on. Get to /sharks/new. If I put this down here, what error am I going to get? Anyone know?
You haven't placed it yet, have you? Wait.
Oh yeah, well, I can always create this little file. If we have this little file right here, h1 new page goes here.
Oh, because it thinks that you have to put the new before the ID, right?
Yeah, If we don't do that, right, and we type sharks.new, we will get this error. Could not find shark with ID equal to new. We did shark.find new. That's not going to work. We've got to put it above get slash sharks ID so that it'll hit this before it hits this. Nice. New page goes here. And here we can go ahead and start creating our form for a new shark. Nice. And now here we can do a little form. Slash form. And do we feel comfortable filling out forms now from, do you want to at least know what goes inside this form tag? You don't have to. Like you can, this is something you can feel free to continue to Google. We need two things, right? We need
Action.
what route it's going to, what method it is using. And both of those things are things you are totally free to look up on the actual review. But how do we say which URL it's going to?
Action equals quotes slash sharks end quotes.
Yeah. And then the method.
Post.
Oh,
Method equals quote post.
Yeah.
End quote.
Nice. Eventually, when we're doing like an edit, we might have to be a little bit more fancy. But we can now go ahead and do our actual form. And at this point, I'm going to HTML forms. I always forget the label syntax, and I like to make sure I use it. Here we are. And I also like just being able to Command F or Command D to replace everything. Cool. Call this one name. You can give it a color. Oops. Color. You can give it an age. And
sorry,
yeah.
it's like the name is what you actually end up seeing in like params, right?
Yes.
So the most important thing.
Yes, for sure. The rest of these things, if all you had was input name equals age like this, that's also fine. I would really recommend getting into the habit of using labels, though. People will judge you for not using them very slightly until you get to JavaScript, in which case it's weird and everything's up for grabs. But this is helpful. The other thing that I might suggest doing, just because I know that we're eventually going to end up editing sharks and I want to be able to copy and paste this whole thing. Do you remember how to do nested parameters?
Is that the shark and then you put the bracket name and
Yeah. If we do this, then all of these things will be put into our params under a key of shark.
label for age, input name. Is one.
So this name is just the name of the input, right?
I'm talking about the label. Label.
Oh, yep, you're right. Cool. And the last thing we want to do, input type equals submit value equals
submit.
adopt a shark.
What's the difference between a button type equal submit in some forms I saw online. Instead of input type for submit, they put button type, I believe.
They I want to say right now it doesn't change anything. I'm trying to just double check that in my head. Buttons behave strangely in JavaScript, but I think input type submit will also behave like a button.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
It does. I'm just
yeah,
wondering. So,
it's also very helpful for CSS, right? Eventually, if you want all your buttons to look the same, being able to call this a button tag instead is something that's useful. But they will both have the behavior of submit.
Okay, thank you.
So buttons are one of a couple of different types of elements that have default behaviors. If I go ahead, let's see if I can prove this. I might be totally wrong. Been a while. Let's edit as HTML. Button. Hello. Nope, didn't do anything. I think a button in a form will default to refreshing the page. So that's the thing that you'll want to care about when you get to JavaScript. Or anything with the submit behavior. But for now, we don't have to care about that. Another thing, I'm going to actually make this input type a number. Cool. And that'll allow us to do something like this, like have our little up and down, right? And if I try to type things that aren't numbers,
It validates for us if you use those specific input types.
Sorry?
It validates for us when we use those input types, right? Like if you
It doesn't validate. So that's
or number.
That's really important. It does not validate for us. It'll make it on the front end, right? We can go ahead and type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's nothing stopping me as a hacker from going in here and changing this to input type equals string or text and writing like is just a number or something annoyingly cloying like that, right? And then if I don't have validations in my model, it will save this. It won't. It doesn't protect your database at all. This is only helpful for the user experience. Database level validations using the validates method or the validate method or the validation or like each validation or a custom validation is the suggested way to do it. This is just for your users. So we can go ahead and go to HTML input types really quickly. First off, this is awesome. If you've never played around with any of them, like this is fun. We can test this out right here. We can go ahead and say color. And then you can like send over colors. There's a bunch of different really cool input fields that you can play around with. There's email fields, which will check to see that it looks like an email. For number, whoops. We can also go ahead and give it a minimum and a maximum. Let's give it a minimum. I don't think sharks have maximum age. That's my new rule. Just because I have seen Shark Attack 3 Megalodon, Deep Blue Sea, they also their brains are a template for a cure for Alzheimer's. So they just don't age in all fiction. So here we go. Now if we go ahead and we refresh this, right, with this min equals 0, I can't go below 0, but I can go as high as I want. Now I can always change this, right? Negative 500. And then I can send this, right?
Our controller isn't allowed to go through, should be okay.
Yes. So if you want to make sure that this works on the back end, we'll get to this next time we talk. Validates age, inclusion in. I've actually forgot the syntax. We're gonna eventually pull that up. But you do like a validation here to double check that anything being saved into your database has that rule. Database level validations are necessary for anything you want to protect your database from. But here we are. We now have something that has a little bit better of a user experience, right? And this is enormously helpful if you've ever been a user and you've seen this get done poorly. Like have some inputs that will error out, but that you can type. It is annoying when you get there. I think when registering for the vaccine, they would allow you to select dates that didn't exist, and then it would send you back and be like, this is a date that you can't use, and I'd be like, just don't let me select it. So that is a real thing that continues to happen. But now we can go ahead and we can create our new post to /sharks do end. That is true. But assuming that we're trying to keep vampires and time travelers from our app, we can go ahead and do shark.create params out of key of shark. Actually, there's one other thing we need to do. So I'm going to actually put a binding.py here. Because we're not fully there yet. I'm going to go ahead and say Chucky, orange, 10. We're going to hit adopt a shark. They actually click that. Boop. There we go. Now in our binding.py, remember we made this nested. So everything is stored under a key of shark here. Params. It's not quite necessary here, but it makes it super useful for when we eventually get to our edit. Because in our edit form, we'll have like an underscore method equals patch, right? So here though, we can go ahead and we could try to call like shark.new params a key of shark. And this works, except user ID is missing. Now that we have login though, this is a really easy problem to solve. We have access to this current user method that we defined in application controller, right? So we can go ahead and say instead, current user.sharks.create using the current user.sharks method that is given to us by the fact that a current user has many sharks. User has many sharks. And here we can go ahead and redirect to sharks. And then shark.id. And eventually we're going to get to like how we do this with validations, right? That's something we'll eventually do once I finish building this out. I think tomorrow will be all about validations and cool additional features like searching and stuff like that. If we don't get to search tomorrow, we'll get to it next week. But this right here, we'll go ahead and create a shark and then redirect to the sharks ID. Let's try that out. So this one is going to error or do nothing. Now, if we do it again, you'll see we actually have Chucky, orange, 10, owner, Batman. Cool. Go ahead, add the rest of the RESTful actions really quickly. Let's first name these. New. Show. Create. Let's move the read actions to the end so that we can keep them paired appropriately. Cool.
I guess in like the very Assassin's Creed sort of way, I'm going to say this, like not all these models like and need all like full set of rest sorry like CRUD actions, right?
Yeah. Definitely. This is going to be really tempting. You're going to be building CRUD actions for the next 16 weeks. Don't just go ahead and add all the CRUD actions. One really obvious example, right? There are times when I might not want new to have its own page. Like on Facebook, I don't want to go to a new page every time I want to post something. I don't ever want to post something on Facebook. But like in the imaginary situation where I did, it is helpful to have that post on the home page rather than like on a separate page that you go to whenever you want to post something. New and edit are both kind of obsolete in the age of JavaScript, or not obsolete, but less done. Now it's like you edit, it'll like just pop up a little like modal, or it'll like allow you to edit in place, and then you click done, and then it submits. The other routes make a lot of sense, but a lot of times you don't want to have to update something. You don't want a user to be able to delete something, and you don't want to be able to see all of something. Like there's, in this case, being able to see all of the sharks in the app, if we decide to make it so that you see all the sharks belonging to specific users, you might not want to have like a, here's the entire pool of everyone's sharks. That might just seem a little bit pointless. We can go ahead now though. And in this case, you do need, for your requirements though, you do need all 7. I think there might be like, if I saw someone who was just like, hey, I had my new page inside the user index or the user show, I might ask that they know how to do it the other way. But if they want to do it for design principles, I would talk to them about that. The rest of these, like, though, I think make a lot of sense to have their own separate pages. Cool. Let's go ahead and create this edit page. It's going to look very similar. I'm actually going to basically copy this with a couple of exceptions. Here, I'm going to say edit shark add shark name. And here we're going to also do a couple of other things. So first off, we're going to need to create a way. This is actually already exists in the, to send over the fact that we're editing, right? Or to send over the fact that there's a patch request, and we haven't defined that anywhere in the in our code. So if I go right here, I'm going to really quickly, let's close all these. This is gross. Cool. Let's go ahead and in our sharks controller, we're going to do a patch /sharks /id do binding.pry. Now here, ideally we can do like a sharks /to/edit, right? Then if I like hit adopt a shark, I would love, whoops, I didn't do anything. So that's actually bad. We now have a dead shark or an empty shark in our database. Shark.last.destroy. But now there's an issue right here where if I go ahead and I say input type equals hidden, name equals method, value equals patch. That's going to be how we usually do things, right? Unfortunately, when I send this over initially, we haven't set up our app yet for us to like override methods with this hidden input field. So I'm going to go ahead and say shark.last.destroy again. Does anyone remember, because I forget, how to make that rack method override thing happen?
Goes in config.ru
Yeah.
and it's use rack method override.
Pretty straightforward. Let's try it again now. So this is a very, this you're going to need in your app. Like if you just want to be like, okay, I'm going to write this in once, we're good. So now if we go back to here and we said, I think the Shark and Crash Bandicoot's name is Tiny. Might be totally wrong. I haven't played that game in 20 years. Here we go. So now, ideally, interesting. Oh, right. Nope. You know what it is? There we go. We still need to actually know what we're doing behind the scenes. Done. We actually need to like patch the right wrap. Cool. Don't need to speed run that. That was a mistake. Penny. Gray. 12. 10. Cool. And now we're in this pry, right? And we can go ahead and say params. And you'll see that we have this information about this new shark, right? And we also have an ID and we have this method patch. This is a point where having these nested params really comes in handy. We can go ahead right now and do like at shark equals shark.find. We can find our old shark and then we can go at shark.update params at a key of shark. And it will work. So in terms of what we actually write in here, you can do shark equals first, get the old shark using the ID that we're sending in, right? Then shark.update params the key of shark. And then we can redirect and even go ahead and copy this. Redirect over to here. This is almost a fully functioning edit feature. There's one thing that I want to show you that we can do also. I'll refresh this. So you'll see that this is all cleared, right? This is annoying. That I have to type in their name, color, and age rather than having that auto-filled for me, right? If we want to solve this problem, we can go ahead and pass in this existing value. So you'll notice in my Sharks controller, I added in to our edit this bit of code right here. Shark equals shark.find params ID. So we actually have this instance of a shark that is defined. So here we can go ahead and say value equals at shark.name. We don't really need to stringify this one. Value equals, whoops, shark.color. Value equals shark.age. Now, if we refresh the page, we're going to have a much better user experience. We're going to have a much better user experience, he said. Quite surprised that that didn't work. Oh, right. This is my new. I'm a fool. Let's go ahead and copy this. No reason not to. Because these input fields are going to stay the same. Cool. There's no reason we can't have that new either. So now we have this input field automatically populated, right? With these values that we passed in from before. So now if I want to update Tiny's age, I can just do that by changing something that already happened. Already had it. Blah. And now we can go over here and we can finish up this by going ahead and saying a ref equals sharks slash at shark id slash edit at shark.name. And we have this like edit tiny. And now this already works. Oh, gotta have a little slash in front, otherwise it will do a relative path. Cool. I'm gonna add one quick delete function, right? For delete, it's gonna work very similarly. We just create a little form, right? That's gonna look like a button. Go ahead and say form action equals slash sharks. Just copy and paste this. Method equals post. And then we just, like for a form, all we really need, right, is a way of overwriting the method. So the same thing we did last time. We went ahead and said input equals input name, type equals hidden. Just give me a hidden input field that has a name of slash underscore method to allow rack through our config.u to know that we're overriding the method here. Value equals destroy or delete. Yeah, delete. And then we can do input type equals submit, value equals delete this shark. Can do a little delete. Find the shark. Shark.destroy. And then redirect slash sharks. So we can try this out. Delete the shark. And now sharks, and now Tiny is gone from our database. I did that one really quickly. But what we're really doing here is we're just adding a form to the shark show page that all it does is say like, hey, here's a secret method called delete. And then we're sending over the IDs using the actual route. Is that clear to everybody? One important thing to note is that these aren't the only routes you can build. So let's go ahead and we have these sharks, they have ages, right? Let's have a little button to say it's their birthday and then update their age by 1. Make sense? Here, we can go ahead and we can create a new method, which we can do like a little this might make sense to the patch. to /sharks/ID/birthday. Do shark. Then we can go ahead and in our actual shark model, let's go ahead and say def birthday. Update self.update birthday self.birthday +1, right? We don't need self for any of these because it's going to inherently call it on itself. Shark.birthday or increment birthday if we want to be very clear about what we're doing. Redirect to the shark, right? So this right here is like, if we do a patch to this route specifically, increment the shark's birthday and then redirect that shark. Let's go ahead and try this out. In our view for our shark, we can do something very similar to our button right here. Go to /sharks/ that shark ID /birthday method patch, right? Cool. Let's go ahead and give shark its Jaws' birthday. Oh, right, I called it. That'd be pretty dark. I called it increment birthday right here. Oh, right. This isn't called birthday. This is called age. Oh. There we go. It's Jaws' birthday. It's Jaws' birthday. And we can even have, let's make this a little bit more fun. YouTube. I'm going to introduce you to the flash hash real quick. Cool. So right here, just because we've got a little bit more time, I technically booked this for an hour. If you want to leave after an hour, that's fine. I've added the Sinatra flash gem since we last did this. Sinatra flash. That is great. What Sinatra flash does is it's exactly like a session, except it only persists for one redirect request. So I'm just like double checking all my claims there. But basically it's exactly like the session except it persists for one request. So it's a way to like when you redirect, give some information about where you're redirecting from, what decision was made, if there were errors, what those are. Let's go ahead. You got to register Sinatra.flash somewhere. So let's go ahead in our patient controller, register Sinatra/flash. We'll start kind of simply right here. Let's go back to our controller. And in here, I'm going to say flash birthday equals true. Cool. And now in our actual show over here, or in our, yeah, we can go ahead and we can start right here by saying flash birthday question mark Cool. /P. Otherwise, do nothing. Or we can make this a little bit less reacty. If flash birthday, do this. You don't have to short circuit everything. Or ternary everything. There we go. Cool. Try this one more time. Refresh the page. Cool. It's Jaws's birthday. And we've got it's their birthday as a quote in quotes. We don't need this in quotes. But also we can go one step further, right? Let's go over youtube.com. Happy birthday. Let's see what the top result is. Anyone have a specific happy birthday YouTube video they like? I have no idea. This looks horrifying.
I think Aqua Teen Hunger Force, one that he writes with Zach Wild. I guess that's not work safe or class safe. Yeah, Spiritual Reformation Anniversary.
How quickly does it become unsafe? Because I'm not actually going to air it here. Cool.
I don't think it has any bad words in it, so.
Great. I'm going to go ahead, hit share. I'm going to copy this embed link. Cool. By hitting embed, go back over here, paste this. Yeah. And now we can refresh the page, and you'll notice the first time we refresh the page, it goes away, right? Because we're not redirecting anymore. We're doing a new request, right? If I say it's Jaws's birthday, it's going to add the ability to watch this little happy birthday video. Cool. So if you ever go back to Facebook and go like, hey, why can't you embed YouTube videos on Facebook? I know how to do that. The answer is because they're trying to create a Facebook Live monopoly. But it's super easy. You can embed YouTube videos whenever you want. You just go to like this embed thing and it will give you the code to do it. And now if I refresh the page, this goes away. Oh, I just deleted them. Sorry, Jaws. Go ahead. Let's add some links to our layouts, and then we'll call it quits, I think, for today. Sure.
I guess while you're doing that, I've been noticing like every helpful thing I've done for my project is like they're saying it's, oh yeah, this is like Rails functionality we're adding to Sinatra. So how long until like how many gems can we add until it just becomes a Rails project? So I'm like, I don't think that's what they want.
You are entirely welcome to add some gems. What gems are you referring to here?
Like form helpers and things like that.
I have no idea whether you can actually use form helpers. They do make things so much easier, but it might be worth just doing it the old-fashioned way and waiting 2 weeks. But if you're finding that, that's good.
Just make it ugly and like they pick a type of liquor and I have to find the actual brand on a different show page. Like until like I'm allowed to use like helpers. And
if you find some specific code that you want to use, just DM me, right? But and I will totally tell you if it makes sense. Like if you're creating a new page or something. Whoops. I did something wrong in that I forgot that I didn't do this beforehand. Since I'm using the same form for new and edit, right? My new now actually passes in this at value because shark.name. You can just pass in a new shark if you want to be able to use the same form both ways, and it actually becomes helpful for rendering errors eventually. Refresh. We can go ahead, add tiny back, right? 13. Now it can be Tiny's birthday. Cool. Refresh the page. and we no longer see happy birthday. Cool. Gonna do one more thing and go ahead and in this user view, right? In this user show page, I'm going to go ahead and I say more data exists here. We can go ahead and say at user.sharks.each do shark. Do a little if statement here. If at user.sharks.any. Go through. Let's give it two ends real quick. Always write your end statement when you write the if or the do. Just otherwise it gets confusing. If you don't get into that habit yet, I would recommend it. Check the name. A equals sharks slash shark.id. Cool. So now if we go to all users, first off, I think, are we cheese right now? I think we're Batman. Batman. We'll have tiny. We'll give this a little. Here is your sharks. Slash H3. Else. H1 again. I told you I wanted sharks with friggin' laser beams attached to their friggin' heads. No, that doesn't make sense because we don't want every user. Let's go ahead and say another if statement. If at user equals current user, give them the ability to add their first shark. Cool. So now we can go ahead, test this out. We're going to see this still looks the same. But if I go to all users, go to cheese. I broke something. Right. This else goes over here. Let's go ahead and indent all of this. Cool.
Tell me, how do you did it? You adjusted it to?
Oh, and just like indenting all of it at once.
Yeah.
You can just highlight it and hit indent, and it'll work.
Oh, okay.
So we got this do block, we've got this end block, we've got this else block. Got this if, we've got this else, this end. I think we have this arbitrary end right here. Yeah, I think that's it. And I don't think we need this indented. Cool. So cheese. This isn't a very visually understandable thing, but if we go ahead over here, log in, whoops, what? Right, yeah, that makes sense. Cheese. 1, 2, 3. we can now go over to our user. We can give a little link to our profile, but it'll now have add your first shark, right? Add one more thing. Add one link to a profile page, right? And here we can just do get to slash profile to redirect slash users slash, and then we can go over here. Whoops. Current user.id, right? Just a new route. If I go to slash profile now, it'll redirect me to slash user slash one. Click this here. It's going to bring me over here. Same thing. But if I logged out and logged in as a different user, it would redirect me to a different user. These are just different routes you can build, just like different rules for how to handle requests. And that's all we're doing here. Is there anything we want to dig into before we end? Cool. So as soon as we're done, we've got the 7 RESTful actions. Let's double check learning.flatironschool.com. Should have had this pulled up. Phase 2. Do y'all hear the music outside my house? Wow. Good gamer mic. Cool. So here, in terms of what we have so far, we have an MVC application. We're using active record with Sinatra. We're using multiple models. We have this has many and belongs to. We have the ability to sign up, sign in, sign out. We don't validate the uniqueness of the user login attribute. We do have the ability to create, read, update, destroy the resource that belongs to the nested user. We do not have this validation to ensure users can edit and delete only their own resources, not resources created by other users. And we don't have the validations. So we have at this point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and we'll build out the rest next time and then build out some optional cool stuff. Cool. All right. Thanks for joining.